Time 7 hours.
The news from Guyana, the region and the world. Compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom and powered by DemeraraWaves.com.
The news comes to you with the compliments of Eureka Medical Laboratories. With the news at this time, I am Tiana Jordan. A very good morning to you. First, the lead stories. The Guyana Public Service Union is calling on public servants to stage industrial action against the 7% wage and salary increase that was announced yesterday. Claims by the Foreign Affairs Ministry that senior and experienced officers from the ministry were excluded from the border team dispelled by advisor on borders Carl Greenidge. The feasibility study for the construction of the bridge over the Quarantine River is to be completed shortly. And regionally, a former Dutch St. Martin parliamentarian convicted for taking kickbacks from government contracts has been jailed and barred from contesting elections. The details of these and other stories will be coming up right here in just a moment.
Don't let the fear of contracting the coronavirus disease deter you from seeking the medical care you need. At Eureka Labs, we ensure the safety of our clients and staff with our rigid sanitization routine. This involves the use of ultraviolet lights to effectively rid the air and all surfaces of viruses and bacteria that may be present throughout the lab daily. The light works to rapidly inactivate microorganisms through a physical process that is invisible to human eye. So the next time you need a checkup, don't hesitate to give us a call on 225-7574 to schedule your appointment.
And now the news in detail. Public servants will receive a 7% wage and salary increase across the board in December of this year. Finance Minister Dr. Ashni Singh announced the salary increase during a nationwide live broadcast yesterday afternoon.
I'm pleased to announce now that your government will be paying an across-the-board increase of 7% to public servants, teachers, members of the disciplined services, constitutional office holders, as well as government pensioners. This increase will be granted retroactively to 1st of January 2021, and work will start immediately to ensure that it is processed and paid to eligible employees together with their December salary and in time for the festive Christmas season. Instructions have already been issued for the work to commence immediately to implement these measures we have just announced.
The Finance Minister also announced a one-off payment for healthcare workers without releasing details.
Your government has set aside an amount of $400 million for a special 2021 payout to be made to frontline workers in the health sector who have continued to face extenuating circumstances in the daily discharge of their duties as our country and the world continue to battle the ravages of the COVID-19 pandemic. The details of this payout will be announced shortly, and the payout will be made to eligible employees before the end of before the end of December 2021.
The Guyana Public Service Union Vice President Don Gardner confirmed to News Talk Radio Guyana 103.1 FM that the government did not consult with the union on the wage and salary increase announced by the Finance Minister. The union says the government has so far not responded to its invitation for talks on increases and has refused to meet with the union. The union says it will issue a response to the announced increase. The Guyana Public Service Union, GPSU, on Thursday called on public servants to start industrial action against the 7% pay increase that the government announced. The GPSU is calling on public servants to work to rule. Work to rule leads to less efficiency as workers do exactly what is stipulated in their contracts and provides little to no leeway for them to be disciplined. The union also called for unity among workers in and out of the public service to make whatever sacrifices necessary to register their disgust at how the government has been treating them. The GPSU lambasted the government for handing out a 7% increase. In apparent reference to the several cash transfers since returning to office in August 2020, that union accused the government of spending public resources on political gimmicks. The Guyana Teachers Union is also condemning the 7% wage and salary increase, which is retroactive to January 2021. That union calculates that the pay increase will actually amount to 3.5% for 2021. The GTU says that the announced salary increase will further increase every item consumers need to get by in December 2021 and beyond. The teachers' union is recommending that the government does not tax the 7% increase for this year, pay outstanding clothing allowance for teachers for this year in December. According to the GTU, the government should also resolve the outstanding Bangchan payment to teachers for December 2021 and resolve the difference in salary for teachers who were employed during the period 2016 to 2020. The GTU is also demanding another 200 million Guyana dollars to the amount set aside for frontline workers so that teachers who have been in the forefront can be compensated like medical personnel. Both the GPSU and the GTU have restated the need for the government to negotiate salary and non-salary matters. Guyana's agent on the border case with Venezuela at the World Court, Carl Greenidge, has defended a leaked letter. He says that his letter to President Irfan Ali back in April had addressed ministerial behavior. Foreign Affairs Minister Hugh Todd and Governance Affairs Minister Gail Teixeira had been in that meeting. Mr. Greenidge told a media conference on Thursday that he had never intended to sow discord but to address communication issues.
In fact, the letter, although pointing to likely adverse implications of ministerial decisions, was primarily about inappropriate ministerial behavior and language, as well as about the consequences of discussing a particular topic in public. And in public, I mean with TV coverage at that stage in time. Again, I repeat, the issue, the letter was about some things that were very specific, had nothing to do with many of the topics I see mentioned in the press, both the social media and in the press. And that really is very disappointing.
Mr. Greenidge questioned the motive for leaking the letter by him to President Irfan Ali, although the matter had been resolved 7 months ago. Mr. Greenidge classified the leak of the document as reckless, reprehensible, and naive. The advisor on borders says he is committed to continuing the process on the Guyana-Venezuela border controversy.
The Foreign Affairs press release indicates that a common understanding exists within the team. And this is as it should be, because since 2016, there has been an agreement between opposition and government as to the virtue of their full joint participation in the deliberations in question and the court hearings. My critical role in this exercise has been forging that understanding, and I intend, in the national interest, to continue along that path in a non-partisan way.
Guyana is expected to complete its memorial for submission to the International Court of Justice on March 7, 2022. Venezuela is scheduled to submit 1 year later. The Foreign Affairs Ministry's claim that certain experienced officers at the ministry were excluded from working on the team of the Guyana-Venezuela border court case was yesterday rejected by border advisor Carl Greenidge. Mr. Greenidge says the release of incorrect statements were made because those persons were not familiar with the issue and did not conduct research. He says both officers have worked and continue to work with the team that is fighting Guyana's legal battle at the World Court.
But both Ms. Trishala Prasad and Ms. Donnet Street were and always have been integrally involved prior to Minister Todd's appointment, and they've continued to be involved. In addition, and as to be expected, the legal and frontiers departments of the ministry have traditionally been integral parts of the process, regardless of government changes, which makes much of the material on show in the press and even in the press release rather astonishing.
The ministry's release stated that certain key officers at the ministry who have knowledge of the border issues and know the boundaries had been excluded from the process by the previous coalition administration. Mr. Greenidge says it was established by both the opposition and the government that there will be continuity of the team and that agreement is still in place. The feasibility study for the construction of the bridge over the Quarantine River will be completed shortly. Star News reports that the head of the Bridges Department at Suriname's Ministry of Public Works, Farazia Atola, says that a tender will be issued next month to allow engineering firms to submit designs for the bridge. The disclosure was made after an orientation visit to Guyana earlier this week. A delegation consisting of representatives of the Ministry of Public Works, a consultancy company, and contractors was in Guyana for talks about the construction of the bridge over the Quarantine River. Guyana and Nakiri were visited to see the places where the bridge will be built. The engineering firms were given the opportunity to become familiar with the sites and ask questions that will help them to design the bridge. The Suriname government says the more than 5-kilometer journey will include a connection to Long Island in the Quarantine River. Both countries hope to start construction of the bridge by next year end. The government is open to purchasing the anti-COVID pill when it becomes available and is approved. Health Minister Dr. Frank Anthony, during his COVID-19 update on Thursday, said the approved drug will be important to Guyana to treat the viral disease.
It is something that we are looking at. As I've said before, we have reviewed the efficacy of the medication. It seemed to be working quite well, and therefore, as soon as it's made available and it's licensed, then that's something that we'll want to look at. And it's certainly a medication that we'll want to add to the meds that we already have been using to treat COVID-19.
Manufacturer of one such pill, Pfizer, has signed an agreement with the World Health Organization Patent Department to allow other companies around the world to be licensed to produce the pill. The arrangement will allow for more access to the pills, easily and cheaper for the treatment of COVID-19. The pill is said to be more than 90% effective in early trials, which were halted to begin production because of its effectiveness. The Ministry of Health says there is a slight increase in active and new COVID cases in the last 24 hours. The COVID death toll is now 968, with the passing of 3 unvaccinated persons. The Health Minister, Dr. Frank Anthony, during Thursday's COVID update.
So in terms of the cases that we have as of yesterday, We have 2,049 cases that are active, and over the last 24 hours or so, we would have been able to detect 91 new cases.
The health minister says there is increased hospitalization as a result in both serious and moderate cases.
Of these cases, of the 2,049 cases, we currently have 64 persons in hospital, with 37 of them at the Ocean View Hospital, and 16 of those persons are in the ICU. We currently have, of the 64 persons that we have in hospital, 44 of them require some amount of oxygen. So across the different hospitals where they're located, they're receiving the oxygen.
The health minister says as of Wednesday, the ministry has recorded 266,127 fully vaccinated adults and 19,758 fully vaccinated children. He says the number of adults partially vaccinated total 394,094 and children partially vaccinated total 28,551. Police say they have destroyed 500,000 cannabis plants at a farm at Maria Henrietta Village, Upper Berbice River. The police say the plants ranging from 1 foot to 8 feet in height were destroyed, along with 2,000 pounds of dried cannabis, 100 pounds of cannabis seeds, and 4 nurseries, all to a value of $2 billion. The release by the Guyana Police Force, GPF, stated that ranks of Regional Division 10 conducted the eradication exercise on 40 acres of land at the said location. Police say when ranks arrived at the location, 2 males were seen attending to cannabis plants and upon seeing the police fled into the vegetation and subsequently made good their escape in an engine boat. Ranks conducted further checks in the area, and 4 nurseries and 6 camps suspected to be living quarters were found. During the search, several suspected emptied 12-gauge shotgun cartridges were found in one of the camps. The suspected cannabis plants and camps were then destroyed by way of fire. Police say the estimated street value for the cannabis plants and dried cannabis is pegged at $2 billion and $2 million. And now in regional news. Prime Minister Ariel Henry pledged his government support for the Haitian National Police, PNH, in their efforts to curb the high incidence of criminal activities in the French-speaking Caribbean country. The PM says his government is committed to restoring security and protecting lives and property throughout the country. He added that his government is firmly committed to improving the working conditions of police officers and their environment. PM Ariel Henry met with the PNH Commander-in-Chief, Franz Elb, and other members of the High Command. The visit by Prime Minister Henry, accompanied by senior government ministers, including Justice Minister Litz Quit, came 48 hours after police say that the body of second-in-command of the Forte Mawazo gang was found on the street on Sunday. The PNH say that Martime alias Gaspillage was fatally injured during an exchange of gunfire with law enforcement authorities last Friday. Police say that they had also arrested at a hospital in the capital, Wimson Hippolyte, a suspected gang leader while he was being treated. On Monday evening, heavily armed men attacked the sub-police station located at Pernier, but they were repelled by members of the specialized units of the PNH that were sent to reinforce the police. The police believe that the gunmen belonged to the 400 Mawazo gang, who were also blamed for the recent abduction of 17 missionaries from the United States and Canada. The gang has demanded a ransom of $17 million. A former parliamentarian in Dutch St. Martin has been jailed, fined, and banned from running for political office after he was found guilty of corruption. The Daily Herald reports that the Court of First Instance also ordered Franz Richardson to repay criminal proceeds amounting to $470,000. His defense lawyer, Jamira Roseberg, immediately filed an appeal. In determining the sentence, the court considered the fact that Richardson was sentenced to 36 months for a similar offense on January 29, 2020. While the prosecution had asked for Richardson to be jailed for 2 years and banned from running for political office for 4 years, the court decided to sentence him to 12 months imprisonment. He has also been barred from contesting elections for 3 years. In the Aquamarine II case, Richardson was found guilty of having requested substantial sums of money from a construction company or its contractor and the owner of a hardware store. The money had been for repairs of storm damage to a building in which the government-owned agency Bureau Telecommunication and Post (BTP) is located. In return for the money, Richardson issued his influence as a politician to ensure that the Taliesin Construction Company would be awarded contracts for maintenance and repair work for BTP and to fast-track payment of existing contracts with BTP. The court also heard that he abused his political functions as a member of the parliamentary committee to gain personal benefit, and he was also a shareholder of 2 companies, one of which he had financial interest in a contract. The court found the former parliamentarian guilty of receiving bribes, partly under the guise of donations to his United St. Martin Party. And now for the international news, the latest coming from the BBC World Service.
Hello, I'm David Harper with the BBC News. The Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has backed down over controversial agricultural reforms, saying he'll repeal 3 laws that have sparked a year of protests by hundreds of thousands of farmers. They'd complained that the changes, which opened farming up to the private sector, would destroy their livelihoods. Mr Modi made the rare U-turn in an address to the nation. Our correspondent Rajini Vaidyanathan was watching.
He admitted he'd failed to explain the benefits of the laws to the farmers. He says they're going to be repealed in the next month. And it is a bit of a about turn. Now, some people say that might be because we've got key elections coming up in the states of Punjab and Uttar Pradesh, of which farmers are a large constituent. So it could be political calculations that this all came down to in the end.
In the past hour, Austria has announced it's reintroducing a national lockdown as it tries to combat its worst levels of coronavirus infection since the pandemic began. The measure will start on Monday and last a maximum of 20 days. Vaccinations will also be compulsory from next February. 3/4 of adults in Austria have been fully jabbed. The Japanese government has approved a record COVID stimulus package of almost $500 billion, including direct cash handouts to households. It includes one-off payments for families with children under 18. The wages of nurses and care workers will also rise. The outcry over the whereabouts of the Chinese tennis star Peng Shuai has continued, with the Women's Tennis Association saying it's prepared to pull its tournament out of China unless it receives proof that she's safe. Here's Celia Hatton.
Like many others who've criticized or challenged China's communist leadership in recent years, Peng Shuai has disappeared. 2 weeks ago, she made a bombshell allegation accusing China's former vice premier, Zhang Gaoli, of sexual assault. Now, the head of the Women's Tennis Association, Steve Simon, says the situation is threatening its relationship with China. He said women needed to be respected and not censored. An email attributed to Ms. Peng and addressed to Mr. Simon that was released by China's state media earlier this week has been widely dismissed.
South Africa's state-owned electricity provider Eskom says it has found clear evidence of sabotage at one of its power plants. The company's chief executive says a pylon was brought down. Andrew Harding has this report from Johannesburg.
For years, South Africans have been forced to endure frequent power cuts, usually blamed on chronic mismanagement and on thieves stealing precious equipment. But the government is now trying to clean up Eskom and is also fighting a bitter factional battle within the governing ANC. It's not clear yet who's behind the sabotage, but fingers are likely to be pointed at corrupt officials and at politicians who have a personal interest in wanting to see Eskom and South Africa's government fail.
World News from the BBC. The International Labour Organization says the authorities in Qatar are not adequately investigating and reporting the deaths of workers, in particular migrants in the building industry. The ILO says data from government-run trauma centres and ambulances last year showed that 50 workers died and more than 500 were badly injured. Qatar has drawn frequent criticism for its treatment of foreign labourers as it prepares to host next year's Football World Cup. Poland's border guard agency says Belarusian forces tried to help migrants force their way across the border, even after a makeshift camp was cleared. A spokeswoman said Belarus brought migrants in trucks to an area where there was an attempted mass crossing. On Thursday, the Belarusian authorities took migrants who'd been at the border to a warehouse for shelter. The Australian Test cricket captain Tim Paine has resigned after learning that an investigation into an incident 4 years ago was being made public. Paine had sent lewd text messages and an inappropriate photo to a female colleague. At the time, the sport's governing body in Australia cleared him of any breach of the code of conduct. But with weeks to go before the Ashes series against England, Paine said he deeply regretted his actions and would step down.
I've been blessed with a wonderful, loving and supportive family, and it breaks my heart to know how much that I've let them down. They have always stood by me, been my most loyal fans, and I'm indebted to them for their support.
The British government says it will support legislation to raise the legal age at which people in England and Wales can marry to 18. At the moment, with parental permission, the age is 16. Campaigners say the bill would help children at risk of being forced or coerced into marriage. But some in the traveller and Roma communities say there hasn't been enough consultation. The bill doesn't apply to Northern Ireland or to Scotland. That's the latest BBC News.
The news came to you with the compliments of Eureka Medical Laboratories.
A COVID-19 PCR test is now mandatory for many routine activities, including travel and return to work purposes. At Eureka, our trained and experienced staff will ensure confidentiality while your test is conducted in a professional and timely manner, with results in just 48 hours. So the next time you require an efficient and hassle-free PCR COVID-19 test, call 624-8378, 608-8378, or 623-7233 to schedule your appointment. You can also ask about our house call testing service.
And now to end the news, here is a recap of the leads. The Guyana Public Service Union is calling on public servants to stage industrial action against the 7% wage and salary increase that was announced yesterday. Claims by the Foreign Affairs Ministry that senior and experienced officers from the ministry were excluded from the border team were dispelled by advisor on borders Carl Greenwich. The feasibility study for the construction of the bridge over the Quarantine River is to be completed shortly. And in regional news, a former Dutch St. Martin parliamentarian convicted for taking kickbacks from government contracts has been jailed and barred from contesting elections. And that's the end of the news.
This has been the news, compiled in the News Talk Radio Newsroom. For ongoing updates, visit demerarawaves.com, and you can check facebook.com/demwaves and twitter.com/demwaves.